Am I wearing florals? For spring? Yes, I am. At least, it was spring when I wrote that, but now I'm wearing a jacket on a very hot summer's day, but for fashion, we must make sacrifices. So, they've turned The Devil Wears Prada into a musical. And because I made that video about the movie, I've had a lot of people ask me what I make of it. So, I went to see it, and I can now give you my exclusive review. It's fine. A review in The Guardian disparaged the show as a Prosecco o'clock musical, to which I'm like, well, obviously? And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Fine, it's not high art, but hate to break it to you, neither's the original movie. If you want a fun night out with the girls, you could do worse. The songs are decent enough, with music by Elton John. Georgie Buckland as Andy puts in a very strong debut performance, and while some have criticised Vanessa Williams for basically replicating her character from Ugly Betty, I think she had a challenging job to do, not only following Meryl Streep in one of her most memorable roles, but also adapting a famously subtle performance into a medium as unsubtle as musical theatre. And she pulls it off effortlessly.
That's all.
Nevertheless, I do see what The Guardian is complaining about. A theatre producer goes to their DVD shelf and selects, I don't know, some popular movie from 2 decades ago because they want to tell the world this story belongs on the stage. But what we all know is their inspiration is not the story, it's not the themes, it's not the stagecraft, it's actually the money. All they do is blithely slap some songs on it and let it trickle on down through production to some tragic West End venue where it will no doubt reel in an easy audience by cashing in on nostalgia. And there's a whole glut of shows like this on the West End right now. Okay, sometimes movie musicals can work. Beetlejuice comes to mind. I've heard good things about Death Becomes Her. There's Heathers, maybe Moulin Rouge? Although they did replace One Day I'll Fly Away with Firework, which...
Oh my god, ew, David!
And yet, more often than not, these movie musicals wind up being fine. Something gets lost in the process of adaptation, even when they have talented people behind it, like Elton John. Not to mention Tony Award-winning director Jerry Mitchell, who's directed successful movie musicals before, and writer Kate Weatherhead, who has a long career on and behind the stage. This seems like the perfect recipe. Even so, when the musical started, I knew something had been lost almost immediately. So the show starts how you'd expect. Andy heads to her interview at Runway. That's a song. The office panics as Miranda Priestley arrives. That's another song. The interview's a disaster, but just as Andy stands up for herself, Nigel interrupts with a fashion crisis and cuts the interview short. In the movie, the crisis is a photo shoot with an ugly feathered headdress. In the show, it's that a designer's new range is florals. To which Miranda inevitably says, "Florals for spring. Groundbreaking." That line doesn't go there. I know that line doesn't go there, because that line comes from the conference room scene.
Florals for spring. Groundbreaking.
The very scene my Devil Wears Prada video was about. So if they've moved that line to Andy's interview, that can only mean one thing. The conference room scene has been cut. Now, if you haven't seen my Devil Wears Prada video, why not? You've had ample time to prepare, why is no one ready? To paraphrase, the conference room scene was interesting to me because it's the only scene in the entire movie in which our protagonist Andy does not appear. She was at her desk, why would she be in there? So why is the meeting in the movie, Melissa? Could it be that writers make decisions for reasons? What might appear to be an unimportant scene is actually crucial to the movie's more nuanced portrayal of Miranda. Where the original book presents her as a power-tripping bully, the movie presents her as ruthless and demanding, but also very good at her job. The conference room scene is part of a broader attempt to show Miranda at work, and the placement of that scene is designed to shift our view of her. For more detail, you know where to find it. But that's not the scene I want to talk about this time. It is relevant, but I actually think cutting it was a sensible decision. A dialogue scene with everyone sitting around a big table doesn't lend itself to song and dance. My interest in that scene is not so much about the scene itself, but how it fits into the larger narrative and themes of the story. And on that front, what concerned me far more was another scene they cut. The book scene. In the movie, that's when Andy is entrusted to bring the mock-up of the current issue to Miranda's house. Now, again, I can see why they'd cut this. What are they gonna do? Hire 2 child actors to play the twins for one scene every night? It's not essential for the narrative to play out this way. My issue is that the show replaces this scene with nothing. Literally nothing. It goes from Andy's makeover straight to the Potter manuscript with nothing in between. And maybe this seems like a small thing, it didn't bother anyone else I know who's seen it, but I just can't get over it, because when I pull at this thread, it unravels the whole thing. That's a fashion joke, don't worry if you don't get it. So in my other video, I talked about how the structure of the movie's plot has this neat, cyclical pattern to it. It changes in the second half of the movie, but for the first half, it's this. Step 1. Andy is given a task, like charting a flight for Miranda during a hurricane. Step 2. She fails. She can't get a flight. Step 3. Miranda punishes her. She chews her out, calls Andy a disappointment. Step 4. Andy perseveres through the punishment. She gets a makeover, proving she's taking fashion seriously. Step 5. Andy impresses Miranda and gets more responsibility. She's asked to deliver the book, which takes us full circle back to step 1. So the book scene is the next step. Step 2. Andy fails. Because of Emily's unclear instructions, she accidentally intrudes on Miranda's personal life, which leads to step 3, her punishment. She needs to get the Potter manuscript. In the original book, the Potter thing is just Miranda being unreasonable. She wants the book before release, which Andy achieves at great difficulty, and then Miranda complains that they only got 1 copy, gaslighting Andy about what she asked for. She's just mean and oblivious. But in the movie, it's clear Miranda knows she's asking for the impossible. She's doing it to put Andy in her place.
Well, we know everyone in publishing. It shouldn't be a problem, should it? And you can do anything, right?
And when Andy succeeds anyway, she's surprised, almost annoyed.
Is there anything else I can do for you?
It's a power play. It's vindictive and petty, but it's calculated. Miranda puts herself in a win-win situation. Either she gets an excuse to fire Andy, or she gets the impossible. Like I said in the other video, she's not disconnected from reality, she insists on reality conforming to her high standards. However, if you cut the book scene, and you keep the surrounding scenes the same, what are you saying with that? Andy gets her makeover, Miranda's impressed, and then demands the Potter manuscript. Now, Andy is being punished for doing well. This isn't a calculated power play, we're right back to Miranda being oblivious. But where the book meant to say that, the show says it by accident. The musical is still trying to make the same point the movie does. At the end, Miranda sings a whole song about surviving in a cutthroat industry right before she betrays Nigel. We're still meant to see her as an intelligent, ruthless tactician. But without the book scene, without the conference room scene, without the pursing the lips scene, that's gone too, I don't believe Miranda is ruthless and intelligent. I mean, some of it's still there, of course they have the cerulean sweater scene, but like I talked about, the movie makes a great effort to show Miranda working, to prove that she is indispensable to Runway. The show doesn't prove that, it winds up suggesting the opposite. And you would think getting Miranda's story right would be the most important thing. Obviously, it can't work the same way it does in the movie, but the skill of adaptation is figuring out how to say the same thing in a different medium, to find an equivalent theatrical version. And the show not only fails at that, it kind of doesn't even try. Take the scene where Andy learns about Miranda's impending divorce. It's about humanizing the monster, proving that this perfect, cold-hearted machine actually has a vulnerable side. It's important because it means we're already feeling sorry for Miranda when we learn she's going to be replaced. But it's a difficult scene to do in a musical. Miranda could sing an impassioned solo about her hardships, but that doesn't really say vulnerability to me. It's not massively different to what we've already seen her doing. It's a scene that really should change if it's gonna say the same thing. Except the musical copies it word for word. And the whole time I was crossing my fingers going, please don't sing, please don't sing, please don't sing. She sings. And the song is fine, at least it's short, but the scene was already working. The song doesn't add anything other than a reminder you're watching a musical. Okay, so it's a bad adaptation then. Clearly, they weren't trying to find a more theatrical way of telling this story. Well, that's the funny thing. With Andy's story, they absolutely do find a more theatrical way of saying it. And they even, in some ways, address some of the movie's shortcomings. First of all, they cut out all the scenes with Andy's friends, which is good because they are terrible. They do serve a purpose, to point out how Andy's job has changed her.
For the last 16 years, I've known everything about that Andy, but this person, this glamazon who skulks around in corners with some random hot fashion guy, I don't get her.
But it just comes across as judgmental. Like, sure, Andy's not keeping her commitments, and she's kind of flirting with the pretty journalist from work, but since the thesis statement of this film is that the fashion industry is important, it's hard to side with her friends when they treat it as a moral failing that Andy has learned that lesson. I mean, she gives them free stuff, and they still don't take her job seriously. But the musical focuses these beats entirely on Andy's boyfriend, Nate, which works better because he has more reason to be upset with her. Andy changing personality matters more in her romantic life because it puts the relationship in jeopardy. And while Nate is upset that Andy has changed a lot, one of the main things that prompts the breakup is that Andy has become someone who would betray a coworker. This is helped by another good change the show makes. The final scene of the first act is the benefit scene, where Andy is roped into a red carpet event at the last minute and misses her boyfriend's birthday. In the musical, the benefit is upgraded to a gala, clearly based on the Met Gala. It has a whole heaven and hell theme, and they sing a song called The Devil Wears Prada. On the nose, but fine. The crucial plot point in this scene, in both the movie and the show, is Andy helping Emily by remembering the name of a guest she's forgotten. This leads to Miranda wanting to take Andy with her to Paris instead of Emily. A decision which, in the conclusion, will be compared to Miranda's betrayal of Nigel.
I couldn't do what you did to Nigel, Miranda. I couldn't do something like that. You already did. To Emily.
And some people have said, that's not the same thing. Andy didn't have a choice.
Why, I didn't have a choice.
For my money, the comparison does work in the movie. Both Andy and Miranda had their jobs put on the line, and they both decided to screw over a coworker to save themselves. The whole movie is about Andy making sacrifices for the sake of her career, not just at Runway, but as a journalist. Like Miranda, she chooses to prioritize her career over her personal relationships. She chooses to stay in the job despite all it costs her.
No, that was different. I didn't have a choice.
No, you chose. You chose to get ahead.
But I can see why people think this is different. Miranda's job was threatened by a corporate coup, whereas Andy's job was threatened by Miranda essentially blackmailing her.
If you don't go, I'll assume you're not serious about your future. At Runway or any other publication.
Do this or I'll torch your whole career. It's a much more black and white choice than Miranda's, and Andy makes that choice very passively. Miranda tells her the news, she goes on a depression walk through the streets, then in the morning Miranda makes her call Emily and tell her she's been replaced. Aside from this nod Andy shares with Miranda, there's no moment where Andy chooses to go to Paris. She just doesn't say no.
That is a pathetic excuse.
Whereas in the show, it's a much more active choice. It still happens the same way, the dialogue is exactly the same, Miranda still threatens her career. But now it happens right away at the gala, just as Andy was leaving. And maybe this change was made just for efficiency, no point redressing the whole set for one small bit of dialogue. But it also meant it comes immediately after Andy ran into Christian, the pretty journalist, on the stairs of the venue. Just like in the movie, he offers to introduce her to his editor, but she turns him down because she's late for Nate's birthday. Except in the show, it's not just that she's late, Nate has a reservation at a very exclusive restaurant, where impressing the head chef could be beneficial to his career. And he's already told Andy they look very unkindly on no-shows. So now, already faced with the Christian or Nate decision, Miranda throws the Paris decision on top of that. And being a musical, Andy sings a song about it, in which she decides she's gonna go for the career she dreams about. I wanna make a difference. I want my story seen. I wanna change hearts and minds in New York Magazine. So if that's what I'm wanting, how can I walk away? It's frickin' Mount Olympus, and the gods are singing Stay. Okay, Georgie Buckland sells it better than I do. The point is, the song ends with Andy going back into the gala, choosing Christian over Nate, and symbolically choosing Paris over Emily. There's a neat parallel in this that I really like. The first act concludes with Andy choosing her career over her relationship, and the second act concludes with Andy realizing she doesn't want to be that sort of person. It's a great way of structuring her story for a musical. So how come they did so well with Andy and yet dropped the ball with Miranda? Well, that's just the occupational hazard of this kind of adaptation. Everyone knows the movie is never as good as the book, and everyone is wrong. I think most people don't realize just how many brilliant movies are actually adaptations. On my other video, I got a lot of comments from people saying how exceptional an adaptation like the Devil Wears Prada movie is. The movie was rare, IMO, because it was much better than the book. It's usually vice versa. One of the few movies that are better than the books they're based on. First time the movie is better than the book. Obviously, I agree the movie is exceptional as an example of clever adaptation, but I don't agree that this is so rare. There are tons of movie adaptations that are better than the book. Fight Club, Jaws, Jurassic Park, Forrest Gump, The Godfather, Die Hard, Blade Runner, No Country for Old Men, The Notebook, Silence of the Lambs, Psycho, Jumanji, Bridget Jones's Diary, Drive, Children of Men, Legally Blonde. Okay, I'm gonna stop before I get a mob of angry authors after me, but be honest. You probably knew some of these, but did you know all of them were based on books? Die Hard sure surprised me. So let's revise that rule. The movie is never as good as the book, if people already know the book. By which I don't necessarily mean that the book was popular, because the Devil Wears Prada book spent 6 months as a New York Times bestseller. I'm talking about cultural cut-through. By the time the movie came out, all that most people knew about The Devil Wears Prada, if they knew anything about it, was fashion and mean boss. Maybe something about Anna Wintour. Hollywood didn't pounce on the book's popularity, though I'm sure it helped. It was the premise they thought they could sell. Fox bought the movie rights before it was even published. But the musical? Like I said, cashing in on nostalgia. Which it kinda can't help but do. It's dominated by cultural cut-through. Every other line has been memified. Everyone knows about the cerulean sweater and the Potter manuscript and the Chanel boots and no, that wasn't a question. That's what bothered me about hearing florals for spring in Andy's interview. Not just because it meant the conference room scene had been cut, but because they kept the line. They had to, because they know the audience is waiting to hear it. And okay, putting that line in the interview scene was a reasonable solution. I just resent that this was a problem that needed a solution, that they couldn't just cut the line along with the scene. Like I said in my first video, director David Frankel and screenwriter Aileen Brosh McKenna shared a strong vision for what this story could be, and they had the freedom to reinvent the book to suit that vision. That's why the movie is such a successful adaptation, because it was able to take this story apart and rebuild it from the ground up into something that was tailor-made for its new medium. But Jerry Mitchell and Kate Weatherhead don't have the same freedom. They have to repeat what the movie did in much the same way the movie did it. When they cut the book scene, the best thing to do would have been to change the scenes around it, maybe even restructure the whole narrative. But they had to keep the makeover, and they had to keep the Potter manuscript, so they just glued the important bits together as best they could. And I do think they did the best they could. But you can't rebuild something from the ground up if you're not free to demolish it in the first place. And it's a shame, because I do think this story could work brilliantly as a musical. There's a lot about it that already does work, but there's also a lot that needs to change, and it can't. It can't do with the movie what the movie did with the book. Fine is really the best it can ever be. I know I've said some harsh words, but I do still stand by what I said at the beginning. As a night of entertainment, you could do a lot worse than the Devil Wears Prada musical. But I can see it butting up against this really restrictive kind of adaptation, which is the reason I tend to distrust musical adaptations of movies, and why I worry about how many of them there are these days. I know theatre is expensive, and audiences are more likely to spend money on something they recognise. Adapting a popular movie is a safe bet. But safe tends to mean boring. Reducing risk tends to mean reducing creativity. I wish we could be less precious with the stories we love the most, as both artists and audiences. If we're gonna retell stories, we should be brave enough to let them change in the retelling. Maybe for the worse, probably for the worse. But I'd rather take that risk and hope for something great than just settle for fine. I don't understand why it's so difficult to smash that like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, by all means move at a glacial pace. Leave a comment, share the video. Am I asking for the moon here? Not really. You know, a million girls would kill to join my Patreon and enjoy early access, behind the scenes content, and comment responses. The link is on the screen now. That's all.